The night everything changed started with the sound of chains dragging across our driveway at 2 a.m. I bolted upright in bed, my heart pounding as I heard the unmistakable whine of a tow truck's hydraulic lift. Through our bedroom window, I watched in disbelief as our wheelchair-accessible van was being hauled away into the darkness. My wife Sarah was already running downstairs, and I could hear our 9-year-old son Liam crying from his room. By the time I made it outside in my pajamas and slippers, Sarah was arguing with a woman standing smugly beside the tow truck driver. Even in the dim streetlight, I recognized Karen Fitzgerald, our HOA board president, clutching a clipboard like it was a weapon. "You can't do this." Sarah's voice cracked with desperation. "Our son needs that van to get to school, to his doctors, to therapy." Karen adjusted her oversized glasses and gave us that infuriating smile she'd perfected over years of petty neighborhood tyranny. "Rules are rules," she said in a tone that suggested she was enjoying every second of this. "The bylaws clearly state no oversized vehicles in driveways. I've given you plenty of warnings." I watched helplessly as the van disappeared around the corner, taking with it our son's independence and our family's peace of mind. Little did Karen know, she had just made the biggest mistake of her HOA career. Let me back up and explain how we got here. I'm David Sanderson, and my wife Sarah and I have lived in the Maple Grove subdivision for 6 years. Our son Liam has cerebral palsy and uses a wheelchair full-time. He's the brightest, funniest kid you'll ever meet, with a smile that could light up a stadium, but his mobility challenges mean we've had to adapt every aspect of our lives. After 3 years of saving every penny, we finally bought a specially modified van with a side-loading ramp. It wasn't just transportation, it was freedom. The ramp allowed Liam to roll right in without us having to lift him, which was getting harder as he grew. The van had special tie-downs for his chair, hand controls for when he's older, and enough space for all his medical equipment. The day we brought it home, Liam was so excited he made us drive around the block 5 times just because he could. "Look, Dad, I'm riding in a real van, not in someone's arms," he'd said, and Sarah and I had both teared up. That joy lasted exactly 1 week before the first letter arrived. The warning came on HOA letterhead, signed by Karen Fitzgerald herself. It stated that our van violated Section 12.3 of the Neighborhood Covenants regarding oversized and commercial vehicles being stored in driveways. We had 30 days to comply by either parking the van in our garage or removing it from the property entirely. I almost laughed when I read it. Our garage, like every other garage in this cookie-cutter subdivision, was barely big enough for a standard sedan. The van, with its raised roof and extended length to accommodate the ramp, would never fit even if we removed everything else. Sarah and I decided to approach this diplomatically. We attended the next HOA meeting armed with documentation from Liam's doctors, his individualized education plan from school, and even a letter from his physical therapist explaining why the van needed to be easily accessible from our home. Karen sat at the head of the meeting table like a queen holding court, flanked by her 2 loyal board members who never seemed to have opinions of their own. She listened to our presentation with that fake concerned expression she'd mastered, occasionally making little sounds that I'm pretty sure were meant to seem thoughtful. When we finished, she cleared her throat. "While we certainly sympathize with your situation," she began, and I knew we were in trouble. "Nobody starts with sympathy unless they're about to stick a knife in your back. The rules exist for a reason. If we make an exception for you, where does it end? Next thing you know, everyone will want to park RVs and boats in their driveways. Property values will plummet." "This isn't an RV," Sarah said, her patience wearing thin. "It's a medical necessity for our disabled child." Karen's smile tightened. "I understand it seems that way to you, but the covenant doesn't distinguish between types of oversized vehicles. Perhaps you could consider parking it at a storage facility nearby." I felt my jaw clench. A storage facility would defeat the entire purpose. We need immediate access for emergencies, doctor appointments, and daily activities. Liam has therapy 3 times a week. "Well," Karen said with a dismissive wave, "that sounds like a personal problem. The board's decision stands. You have 23 more days to comply." Over the next 3 weeks, we tried everything. We hired a lawyer to review the covenants, looking for any loophole. We gathered signatures from sympathetic neighbors, though many were too afraid of becoming Karen's next target to sign. We even offered to pay for additional landscaping to screen the van from street view. Karen responded by sending increasingly threatening letters, each one copying more board members and even the HOA's attorney. The fine started at $50 per day and quickly escalated to $100. She began taking photos of our driveway at all hours, documenting what she called our flagrant violation. Then came the night of the towing. We'd received no final notice, no warning that enforcement was imminent. Karen had apparently decided that surprise was her best weapon. The next morning was chaos. Liam had a crucial orthopedic appointment that we had to cancel because we had no way to transport him safely. Sarah had to call out of work. I spent hours on the phone trying to locate our van, calling every tow yard in a 20-mile radius. It wasn't until late afternoon that we found it at a lot 30 miles away. The towing fee was $800, plus daily storage charges. When I asked how they had the authority to tow from private property, the lot owner showed me paperwork signed by Karen as HOA president, claiming the vehicle was abandoned. That's when our neighbor, Robert, changed everything. He knocked on our door that evening, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I overheard what happened," he said. "My daughter's a paralegal, and she says what Karen did might violate the ADA. I'd heard of the Americans with Disabilities Act, of course, but I'd never thought it applied to HOA disputes. Robert gave me his daughter's number, and that call led us to Amanda Morrison, a disability rights attorney who listened to our story with growing indignation. "Let me get this straight," Amanda said during our first meeting. "The HOA towed a wheelchair-accessible vehicle that your disabled son requires for basic mobility, after you provided medical documentation of need?" "That's exactly what happened," Sarah confirmed. Amanda's eyes lit up like a prosecutor who'd just found the smoking gun. "This isn't just wrong. It's potentially a federal violation. The Fair Housing Act, as amended, requires reasonable accommodations for disabilities. HOAs aren't exempt." We hired Amanda on the spot, and she went to work like a legal bulldozer. Her first move was to file a demand letter requiring the immediate return of our van and cessation of all fines. Karen's response, through the HOA's attorney, was predictably dismissive. They claimed the rules were applied uniformly and that disability status didn't grant special privileges. That's when Amanda filed the lawsuit. The complaint alleged violations of both the ADA and the Fair Housing Act, seeking compensatory damages, punitive damages, and injunctive relief. She also requested all HOA communications regarding our situation. The discovery process was a goldmine of Karen's arrogance. Her emails to other board members were shocking in their callousness. In one, she wrote, "The Sandersons keep playing the disability card like it's some kind of get-out-of-jail-free pass. If they can afford a fancy van, they can afford to store it properly." In another email, she mocked our medical documentation, calling it typical manipulation by parents who think their kid deserves special treatment. Most damning was an email where she explicitly stated her plan to tow the van without warning to send a message to anyone else thinking of challenging board authority. As news of the lawsuit spread through Maple Grove, the neighborhood divided into camps. Some residents who'd been victims of Karen's petty tyrannies over the years finally found their voices. Stories emerged of her citing people for grass being half an inch too tall, Christmas decorations left up one day past the deadline, and even the wrong shade of beige on a mailbox. Others, mostly Karen's friends and those who feared property value impacts, rallied to her defense. The next HOA meeting was standing room only, with heated arguments breaking out between neighbors who'd been friendly for years. Karen tried to maintain her composure, but cracks were showing. She started making mistakes in meetings, forgetting procedures she'd wielded like weapons for years. Her usual supporters began distancing themselves as the legal bills mounted and the negative attention grew. The turning point came when a local news station picked up the story. The segment featured footage of Liam struggling to get to therapy appointments without his van, contrasted with Karen's cold emails. The reporter interviewed other families in the area who'd faced similar discrimination from HOAs, turning our case into a symbol of a larger problem. Karen's employer, a real estate firm that prided itself on inclusive housing practices, was not pleased to see their employee portrayed as discriminating against a disabled child. She was quietly placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the case. The trial itself was almost anticlimactic after all the build-up. Amanda presented our case methodically, showing how the HOA's actions constituted a failure to provide reasonable accommodation under federal law. She demonstrated that the van's presence in our driveway caused no actual harm to property values or neighborhood aesthetics. Karen took the stand in her own defense, trying to argue that she was simply enforcing rules equally. But under Amanda's cross-examination, her prejudices became clear. She couldn't explain why she'd never towed the Millers' oversized pickup truck or the Johnsons' boat trailer, both technical violations of the same rule. When pressed about her emails, Karen tried to claim they were taken out of context. But when Amanda asked her to provide the proper context for calling our son's disability a manipulation tactic, she had no answer. The judge's ruling was decisive. He found the HOA liable for violating the Fair Housing Act's reasonable accommodation requirements. The judgment included $30,000 in compensatory damages for the costs and emotional distress we'd endured, plus $50,000 in punitive damages to send a message about disability discrimination. More importantly, the judge issued an injunction requiring the HOA to immediately revise its policies to comply with federal disability laws. Any rules that could impact residents with disabilities would now require a review process for accommodation requests. The aftermath at the next HOA meeting was something to behold. The room was packed again, but this time the mood was different. A motion was made to remove Karen from the board presidency. When the votes were counted, it was unanimous except for Karen's own vote. As the results were announced, I watched Karen's face cycle through disbelief, rage, and finally something like fear. She stood up, her clipboard clattering to the floor, and looked around the room at neighbors she'd ruled over for years. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice shaking. "Without me, this neighborhood will fall apart. Property values will tank. You'll be begging me to come back." But nobody was listening anymore. Security escorted her out as she continued her protests, and the room erupted in applause. The new board president's first act was to formally apologize to our family and announce a full review of all HOA policies to ensure legal compliance. Within 3 months, Karen had sold her house and moved away. The irony of her destination wasn't lost on anyone who heard about it. She'd relocated to a nearby community known for having one of the strictest HOAs in the state, one that had recently been forced to undergo similar ADA compliance training after their own lawsuit. As for us, we installed a small concrete pad beside our driveway specifically designed for the van's ramp deployment, with the new HOA's full blessing. Liam decorated it with chalk art reading, "Liam's Launchpad," and nobody has dared complain about it. The $30,000 judgment covered our legal fees and the emotional counseling Liam needed after the trauma of losing his independence, even temporarily. The additional $50,000 went into a college fund for him, a silver lining from Karen's discrimination. Sometimes I see Karen's old house, now owned by a young family with twins. They park their minivan in the same spot where our accessible van used to sit. Nobody says a word about it. The neighborhood hasn't fallen apart. Property values haven't tanked. The only thing that's changed is that Maple Grove is now a place where neighbors look out for each other instead of looking for violations. And Liam? He still loves riding in his van, but now he loves it even more knowing that we fought for his right to have it. Sometimes he asks if the mean lady still lives here, and we tell him no, she had to move somewhere else. "Good," he says with the wisdom only a child can possess. "Maybe she'll learn to be nicer there." But somehow, I doubt it. People like Karen don't change. They just find new neighborhoods to terrorize until someone stands up to them. We were lucky enough to have the law on our side and the resources to fight. Not everyone is so fortunate. The last time I heard about Karen, she was already filing complaints in her new neighborhood about somebody's garden gnome being 2 inches too tall. Some lessons, it seems, are never learned. At least not by people who believe rules matter more than human dignity. The $50,000 punitive damage award was the largest our lawyer had seen in a residential HOA case. When the judge announced it, Karen's face went completely white, and she swayed on her feet like she might faint. Her attorney had to steady her as she gasped, "50,000? That will bankrupt me."